This is Censor Studio, clearing away the clouds of common sense. If we talk about President Teureompeu's achievements, it's that he's really putting an end to many conflicts. Of course, the prevailing opinion is that President Teureompeu is doing this because he wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize. It looks like President Teureompeu is saving many lives. Today, let's examine President Teureompeu and his goal to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Less than a year after President Teureompeu took office, many wars and conflicts persisted globally. As you know, President Teureompeu achieved ceasefires and led peace talks in those conflicts. First, let's take a look at the wars and conflicts that President Teureompeu ended. In January of this year, President Teureompeu resolved conflicts in Cambodia, Thailand, India, Pakistan, Iran, Israel, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Azerbaijan, and Armenia after the invasion. He resolved 5 conflicts and wars. Let's review them individually. First, in the case of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, there is a rebel group called M23 in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This M23 rebel group is being supported by Rwanda. Rwanda interfered in Congo's affairs by backing Tutsi rebels like M23, claiming it was for national security and to protect Congolese Tutsis. Eastern Congo had gold, diamonds, and many other buried resources. Early this year, M23 rebels launched a major offensive and occupied key cities in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. As a result, the conflict began to escalate to its worst situation. At this time, the United States actively intervened and eventually succeeded in reaching a peace agreement. Also, in the case of India and Pakistan, a conflict was triggered by a terrorist attack that occurred in Indian Kashmir. News emerged that Pakistan supported the armed group behind the attack, sparking conflict. Both sides then launched drones and missiles, nearly starting an all-out war. President Trump intervened, speeding up the peace process, leading India and Pakistan to agree to a ceasefire. When intelligence showed Iran's nuclear program was advancing and near completion, Israel preemptively attacked Iran. This led to a fierce war between the countries. At this time, Iran showed its determination not to give up on nuclear development and continued its attempts, leading to a precarious situation. The United States launched airstrikes on Iran's nuclear sites, prompting Iran to attack the United States base in Qatar in response. Israel and Iran agreed to a ceasefire mediated by the United States. President Trump used Truth Social to promote his diplomatic moves after mediating the Israel-Iran ceasefire, portraying himself as a world peace mediator. He stressed that only he could order a strike on Iran's nuclear sites and that his decision led to the ceasefire. And after resolving the military conflict between Iran and Israel, he praised himself by saying that a full-scale war would have broken out if it weren't for him. Cambodia and Thailand are also similar. The two sides have clashed over unresolved border issues, and a conflict erupted between Cambodia and Thailand. Prime Minister Paetongtarn also made negative comments about the task force to Cambodia's former Prime Minister Hun Sen, which were later revealed. With Prime Minister Paetongtarn facing impeachment, Thailand's politics grow chaotic. On top of that, an incident occurred where Thai soldiers were injured by landmines from the Cambodian military, and as the conflict between the two sides intensified, it really came to the brink of war. President Trump intervened again, resulting in a ceasefire. Azerbaijan and Armenia remain in conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. In particular, there was significant confrontation between the two sides over the Zangezur corridor, and at this time, the United States stepped in and offered to manage the Zangezur corridor instead. As a result, both Azerbaijan and Armenia responded positively, and ultimately, Azerbaijan and Armenia were able to bring an end to more than 30 years of long-standing conflict. President Trump pushed for this and has ended multiple conflicts and wars, not just one or two. President Trump was involved in everything that happened this year. I gave you a brief explanation, but you can see how obsessed President Trump is with the Nobel Peace Prize. President Trump said on Truth Social he ended many wars 6 months after taking office and is proud to be a president of peace. I'm not sarcastic, there's truly no other peacemaker like him. You probably already know how obsessed President Trump is with the Nobel Peace Prize. Because of this, several countries around the world are actually using nominating President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize as a kind of strategy. What about Cambodia, for example? They said President Trump's intervention was essential to resolving the border dispute with Thailand, and they recommended him for the Nobel Peace Prize. Leaders worldwide are actively recommending President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Pakistan acknowledged President Trump's strong diplomatic efforts and nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize. President Benjamin, the Prime Minister of Israel, presented President Trump with a letter recommending him for the Nobel Peace Prize during their meeting, saying, "President Trump, you have worked to end conflicts around the world." That same month, the leaders of Gabon, Mauritania, Senegal, Liberia, and Guinea-Bissau met President Trump at the White House and praised him as deserving of the Nobel Peace Prize. The common view is that this praise for President Trump comes from political interests. Countries needing United States military and financial help in trade, security, and aid tried to win President Trump's favor by flattering him. The Wall Street Journal noted that the Nobel Peace Prize, which President Trump wants, has become a way for countries to win his favor. This isn't the first time President Trump has sought the Nobel Peace Prize. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize several times, citing the first North Korea-United States summit in 2018 and the peace agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates in 2020 as reasons. But each time he ultimately failed to win. The problem is, it seems President Trump has been quite stressed about this. Time magazine reported that repeatedly not winning the Nobel Prize hurt President Trump's pride and need for recognition. President Trump is obsessed with the Nobel Peace Prize, partly because of former President Obama's presence. According to Axios, after former President Obama received the Nobel Peace Prize shortly after taking office in 2009, President Trump complained that he had done much more than Obama, so why wasn't he given the Nobel Peace Prize? During the Trump administration, a former senior White House official also appeared on National Broadcasting Company and said that Trump is obsessed with the fact that Obama succeeded, but he himself has not. John Bolton, former United States National Security Advisor, also commented on President Trump's peace mediation diplomacy, saying that more than anything else, President Trump wants the Nobel Peace Prize. Judging by these things, it seems President Trump really wants the Nobel Peace Prize. Stories of President Trump's fascination with the Nobel Peace Prize have circulated in Washington and international media for a long time. Even if you take a brief look at his political moves, there are quite a few cases where he has visited conflict zones to try to mediate and has actively intervened to resolve long-standing conflicts that had not been settled for years. In fact, as a result of his intervention, a ceasefire was declared in long-time war zones, and troops withdrew from border standoffs. There were even cases where children no longer had to fall asleep in fear. Only President Trump truly knows his real intentions. Some interpret this as a political strategy to win the Nobel Peace Prize, while others see it as leadership toward true world peace. But what's important is that, regardless of the motive, countless lives have ultimately been saved from the brink of war. War and conflict are not just news headlines, they are matters of life and survival for countless people living through them. Therefore, even if President Teureompeu acted with the Nobel Peace Prize in mind, it's hard to criticize the act of creating peace itself. Ending war and achieving peace is a universal goal, regardless of political motives. The lives saved and returned to normalcy are often more valuable than political gains. We should focus more on the results and changes he made, not just his intentions. Some critics argue that President Teureompeu's rush for peace could actually create new conflicts. Former advisor Bolton mentioned the ceasefire process between India and Pakistan after their military clash, and claimed that because of President Teureompeu's actions, not only the Indian government but the entire nation is angry. He said mediating the Thailand-Cambodia border dispute was just a threat to impose tariffs if no agreement was signed. He warned things are calm now, but another conflict will arise later. We will have to wait and see what kind of results President Teureompeu's choices will bring. President Teureompeu continues to travel around trying to end wars and conflicts. He has actually contributed to creating some degree of peace in the world. Will President Teureompeu get the Nobel Peace Prize he wants? History often judges by results, not intentions. Will President Teureompeu's actions be remembered in humanity's quest for peace? Share your thoughts in the comments. That's the end. Thank you.